Welcome to the June 26th, week beginning June 26th, Stocks to Watch video. And yes, Bitcoin is back. While large cap equities have begun what appears to be an orderly pullback, the bull has passed the baton on to Bitcoin, it would appear. And most of the long setups, I believe almost all of the long setups in my video, are crypto related, while the other stuff needs to reset. However, I do have some warning signs on some of the on some equities that would indicate we might have something more than a reset in progress here. But let's get going on sort of the key charts of the week, and then we'll get right to the stocks to watch video. Certainly the key chart for me this week is Bitcoin. We have seen a flag breakout, a flag that was formed pretty much all of April, May, and most of June on the weekly chart has broken up and has now challenged this horizontal pivot, which goes back to 2021. A recapture of that pivot, to me, would be a massive bullish signal. I actually kind of am expecting it at this point. We may see a week of sideways first, but Bitcoin is back, baby. I'm not sure if everyone believes this rally yet, but when I look at the equities involved, I certainly do think that there is a possibility of a roaring bull beginning in Bitcoin. So let's just get right to the charts. We're going to start with we're going to look at these charts in order of where they finished in the weekly range last week. Not surprisingly, the long setups, of which there are only a few, followed by several short setups. But the long setups will be likely the first few that we go through here. They all kind of are in crypto. So let's start with HIVE. HIVE is a blockchain company. Here's the weekly chart where you can see that the long channel off of the all-time highs has begun to break out. The stock's breaking out of that channel and challenging this pivot going back to the beginning of 2023. So this is one where on the daily chart, it's a little extended. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little shucking and jiving around this area, but if it can create some kind of low risk pivot entry or low risk entry here at this pivot, it's one that I'd be looking to. There's a lot of air above these crypto charts, as you're going to see, and this one really has not much until the mid sevens, at which point it's going to run into issues should it get there, but going to be on the watch list for next week. Moving on to another crypto chart, Coinbase is one worth watching. It is not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination. It has lots of overhead supply to deal with. It has not even broken out of this wedge, but this is an encouraging looking chart now. So it's one for the watch list. It is low on my priority actionable list for next week, but it's on there basically in empathy with the rest of the sector. Moving on to yet another crypto chart. This is Marathon Digital Holdings, of course, the biggest Bitcoin miner there is. What we have here on the weekly chart is a base forming above a base. On the daily chart, it's actually not all that extended. It had a little pullback last week and is now challenging this pivot again. I think this one is probably the most actionable one for next week. So I'm looking to get into this one. Again, this isn't financial advice. This is more of a trading diary for myself. I hope you enjoy it. But if you are trading based on any of these charts, you are on your own. But this one is on my list for early next week. Another Bitcoin miner is Bitfarms, BITF. Some of these are a little bit low priced. I don't know if y'all like to look at those, but by all means, this one has already broken out of the base that it formed throughout 2023 and is kind of into blue sky up until about 235. That would be a nice gain from here. On the daily chart, it is a little extended, but the volume coming in down here is notable. I really like the looks of this one, and I'm looking to see if I can get in next week. I'm looking possibly at getting in early next week. and using this area here as the stop, which is basically the low of Thursday, and the breakout above this pivot, I guess that is around 135 or so. So there's another miner for you. Yet another crypto stock. I'm not sure what these folks do, but they are crypto related. If anyone knows, just let me know in the comments. And on that note, if you like what you're seeing here, please like and subscribe. Let me know if you'd like me to keep doing these. I have a lot of fun doing them. And again, this is a trading diary for me that I like to review at the end of the following week before I produce my next stocks to watch video. But yeah, like, subscribe. Let's get this channel moving. So IREN, it has not broken out of its base. So there's other ones that are further along. This is an IPO. So overhead supply is less of an issue on this one, but it is probably not actionable this week, but certainly in the next couple of weeks. Moving on to another crypto miner, of course, is RIOT. I think they're number 2 after Marathon as the largest Bitcoin miner out there. Different type of setup. This is a flag that has not broken out yet, but it is one on my list for next week. I much prefer Mara. Certainly, I think BITF is the most advanced, but I think Mara actually provides the cleanest entry for next week, for me anyway. And the last crypto stock that I'll look at is CleanSpark. I don't know what they do either. Again, if anyone knows, you can feel free to put it in the comments. This is broken above this pivot back here, and now you can see that it's formed another little base. And should it take out 519 or so, it's got some blue sky up to about $7, and it's going to run into this anchored volume weighted average price as well up in that area. This one's interesting because it kind of had this descending wedge, and it actually formed another little wedge here and then just kind of turned tail. So the volume on these crypto stocks over the last few weeks is enormous. This one is creating a massive volume shelf here. So I do believe that should this break out, I believe it will not fail. So moving on to 2 other longs that I have that are not crypto related, and there are only 2, it would appear. This is Uber. Uber's one I've discussed in my previous videos. That's in a power trend, just riding this 10-day moving average at this point. It's getting a little bit late cycle. I'm not sure how much further it's got to go before quote unquote real correction begins. But for now, I do like this at bare minimum as a scalp if it can get above, I guess it looks like 44 or so. But it's one that I would not be looking to overstay my welcome in should it break. And I think the only other long on my list is Lowe's. Lowe's, it's one of the few retailers that looks pretty good right here. It's broken above this low pivot here and is now sort of heading up to sort of a much more important pivot. I've seen some of these fail recently, so I'm not terribly excited, and I actually don't think this is actionable for this week. I think it's going to need to put in some work at this pivot here, which is around the 220, 221 area. But I'm putting it on the watch list regardless. And now we just move on to the short setup. So we're going to start with the most speculative of all the short setups I have. This is Amazon. This is symptomatic of a lot of charts that I'm seeing. So this pattern is working elsewhere on the short side. So I thought I'd put it up here. This is what's known as an ending diagonal. It is a terminal move in a bull trend that where it just kind of after sort of decent moves up with corrections, it begins to overlap in a rising fashion with price contracting. And on the 130-minute chart, you can see that it's hit the top here, and the risk here is that's it, and the bull trend is over. So this isn't one that I'd be looking at anytime early next week. This needs to show some sort of move down in a rather impulsive looking way, and then a lower high would need to form, and then a lower low would need to come in, and that would be the short. So I'm just putting it on the watch list next week, almost more for a clue as to what's happening out there. I don't have any intention of shorting this next week, but it is going to be a clue for the broader market for me. Moving on to one of the short setups I mentioned in my last video. This is US Steel. Reviewing this, we have a ascending channel, which broke a few weeks ago and has since just kind of entered a bear flag consolidation. The true pivot is not until the short pivot would not be until this range is broken. However, as now that it's hit and back tested this, I do think there's an early entry, and here's the 130-minute chart. An early entry could be had as a short setup should it take out this area here, which is the low of this little consolidation from last week. Because at that point, I do believe that the next move down has begun as the back test was successful and held on the big channel break. Moving on to TOST. TOST is another one of these ending diagonal plays. It's already broken. It was one I was looking at as a possible long setup for a while, as this looked like kind of a base forming, but this wedgie action into resistance is not what you want to see for a stock that's going to take out the base. Now, I could be wrong, but to me, this has collapsed from a wedge. The target is the low of the wedge down here at around 1840 or so. So what I'm looking for on this is some kind of lower high, lower low, and to short the lower low. Moving on to Pepsi. Pepsi is yet another one of these ending diagonal plays. This is a weekly chart. This is a big wedge. If this is operational at this point, this stock is going to be entering a cyclical bear. So this is where it hit the top of the wedge. We've had one move off, and we have at this point the first reaction. Should this form a lower high, and we will only know if it's formed a lower high once it takes out this low here, I believe this wedge will crack, and the entire the stock would retrace all the way down to the low of the wedge, which is 155. Pepsi is not a fast mover. This could easily take months to do. But I am looking for a breakdown here. And, you know, when I look at these consumer staples, and I don't know why I did this, but I spent time looking at some of these consumer staple stocks fundamentally, and I have no idea why stocks like this are trading at like 25, 30 times earnings. These are staples. They are not changing the world. They are selling soda. So I have no problem in believing that Pepsi could come down to 155. Moving on to CTAS, CTAS. This was one I was looking at as a long as well, as it broke above this pivot. But again, we had this wedgie structure that created the classic sort of overthrow of the wedge, and it's kind of moved back into the wedge now. So this is not one I'm looking at for next week. I wouldn't play this one until it broke the wedge, because it is in breakout mode at this point. It's got this pivot, it's above this pivot. So something where it broke the low of the lower line of the wedge, or sorry, broke the lower line of the wedge. Possibly buyers would be found here anyway, and it would take some time to sort of make its way down. So I'd be looking for, I will be waiting on this one to break the wedge, make a lower high, and then a lower low is where I'd hit. Its target is down here at 440. As this breakout fails. Moving on to PayPal, and yeah, PayPal is, you know, you think the shorting might be done. I'm not sure that's the case. As you can see, it took out its 2022 low already. This one that never really has gotten out of its bear. And it's entered an area of very thin structure all the way down to this area here, which is looks like about $44. So what's happened since it took out this pivot is arguably it's just a bear flag back to that pivot. Now, this one does look actionable to me next week. Here's the 2-hour chart, the 130-minute chart. If this takes out the low of last week, I guess this is probably Friday's low at 65.86, then it's very likely that this flag is going to break and it's just going to head back down. This is such a dog shit stock. I can't believe it. But on the other side, should it actually recover this pivot, then it actually probably becomes a long. But right now, I have no reason to doubt the downtrend that has now been in place going back to February to over 2.5 years, or about 2.5 years is over. I don't see any reason to believe it's over. Dexcom. Dexcom was one I was looking at as a long, and I still kind of am. It is interesting here, however. So it has broken above this base, and it kind of broke above the base on decent volume and has just had an inside week. I'm a little concerned about this wedginess, but it's not really a tight one. So right here, if one was to play long, and I am sort of looking at this more as a long right now, if we can create some sort of structure in here above this range, then by all means, I think it's off to the races for this one. Now, should it fall back into this range at this point, uh, it's likely moving all the way back to the bottom of the range. That's how these little look above and fails tend to work. That would be down to 102. But right now, when I look at it on a 130-minute chart or something like that, it's fine. And arguably, if it takes out the high from Friday, which is around 127, you could set your stop at Friday's low. But I would not be overstaying my welcome should this thing decide it wants to head back to Friday's low, because that would begin to look like a failure to me. TGTX, this was one that I had as a short from my video a couple of weeks ago, and it continues to pay out. So this action here, a lot of folks I know were looking at that as a pullback to a little flaggy pullback, and it did try to break up out of that flag. And as soon as it failed above this pivot, I was all over this thing as a short, and it just broke the channel, and now it's broken the low from, I guess, this May 30th low, and it continues down. So this is a short and hold, at least it was. I'm not sure I would be entering here with new money shorts until it created yet another lower high, lower low combination. Now we head into some of the more worrisome charts of the market. We'll start with Morgan Stanley. This is, we're going to get into the regional banks in a few seconds, but this is not a regional bank. This is a major financial services company. It has broken this channel. It's been sticky, but it does look like it's finally going to give. I am not interested in a short right here, simply because when I drop down to a daily, you basically have had 5 straight days of down, and the stock has dropped 8% in a week. That is a lot for Morgan Stanley. This thing needs some more structure. Arguably, this is one you should wait, or I would wait for a move below this pivot and then create a lower high, and then the lower low becomes the short. But should that actually happen, this stock, the measured move, as you can see by these blue lines I've drawn in, is down at 65. There's a lot of downside room here. This is a bit of a worrisome chart for the entire market, especially the financials. Moving along, I'm going to go back to tech, and this is Micron. Micron was one where a couple weeks ago my video was talking about it as a long, as it came back to this breakout pivot, and indeed the buyers stepped in, and I did actually play this one long, but I did not overstay my welcome, thankfully, and it looks like it's given a lot of it back. And if this decides that it doesn't want to start to tighten up, consolidate, and begin to make a move up and out, and begins to fall back below this pivot, this stock would likely be in trouble. Failed breakouts are my favorite trades. This would become a roaring short to me for a move at least back into the middle of the range down here, and possibly worse. Booking.com, this was another ending diagonal play I talked about a few weeks ago, where it took out the ending diagonal. It's had its first reaction, and now it's kind of consolidating. I'm not sold on this one as a short yet. The bears have work to do here. There are better short targets than this one. Arguably, one could sort of play the break of this area here for a move back down to the bottom of the range, but this pivot here is kind of what matters. That would be the end of this bull run. I don't know where it would be pulling back to, but the other thing about this stock is if you look at the weekly, this is the all-time high, this green rectangle I've drawn in, and we had a look above and fail. So this is another thing supporting that this bull run is over. Upstart. Upstart is another ending diagonal play where we just kind of had a wedge up, a little overthrow, and it spent all last week declining what I think is about 25%, something like that. Yeah, I felt that. And this is one I'm looking for a lower high, and then I would take the lower low. I don't know if it's going to keep going down tomorrow and then do the lower high, lower low thing, or it could start on Monday. But after a 25% down move off the high, it's certainly not a place I'd be looking at new money shorts. Certainly, it looks like it's going to retest this pivot. It's on my list maybe for later in the week. Now we go to some of the more serious shorts. This chart is tan. It is the solar ETF, and it looks awful. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago where we'd broken this symmetrical triangle and we're just in bear flag consolidation. And now last week it opened at near the high and it closed near the low and has even probed a little bit below this consolidation. If you look at a daily chart, it's hanging now down. It's formed a hammer at the bottom of the range. So this is not a place that's actionable as a short. For all I know, this could head right back to the top of the range. But this is one where I am looking for lower high, lower low. And if this bearish consolidation does break to the downside and can offer me entry, it's got a long way to fall. Basically, this entire triangle ends up being a corrective pause in a larger downtrend, and we certainly could see a move all the way back down here to about $55. Going back to financials, Bank of America, yet another very clean looking short to me. This is a stock that took out its 2022 lows during the banking crisis, has still not really caught a bid, and is now in bear flag consolidation. It actually is getting close to this 2016 uptrend line, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some interaction there. And on the daily time frame, it's another one that just spent 5 days last week going down, so this isn't really actionable. And not in this spot. It's still in kind of no man's land. So this is something where it's going to have to take out this low, create a lower high, lower low thing, as I've been mentioning, as probably have figured out my trading style by now. And then lastly, let's move to the regional banks. I was early on this one. This was a short I had pegged a few weeks ago. This just looked like a bear flag to me. That is exactly what appears to have happened. It has broken to the downside, is now challenging the anchored volume weighted average price off of that low. If this was to be a fresh up, and then this is just a pullback before we move back up, there's supporting evidence under the hood that that's not going to be the case. Let's start with the other short that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, which is Truist, which is, I think, the second biggest stock by market cap in that index. I was following this wedge break. It then reacted, back tested the wedge. It has now not only broken the wedge, it's actually broken the entire channel. In theory, a wedge will retrace entirely, which means it's heading back down to $26 or so. It's just more supporting evidence that the financials are in bad shape right now. Probably the worst looking stock to me in this sector is M&T Bank, MTB. This stock looks horrible. In this downtrend, we basically have a bear flag consolidation. We have a wedge breakdown. Looks to me like it's heading back to the bottom of this range, which means it'll be a third test of that range and likely break. Should that break, there's really no structure to hold it up until we get down to at least 105 when we start to head into this consolidation area here. I may or may not play this. It's certainly not playable until I've seen some kind of reaction. I wish I had actually played it on Thursday when it took out this low. I didn't notice it until this weekend. This is just another huge bearish clue for the financials and arguably for the larger market and the broader market. And speaking of which, let's take a look at probably the most interesting chart with respect to the broad market. This is the value line geometric index. It's an equally weighted index of 1,700 stocks where there's a formula that's used to calculate it. Suffice to say, the end result is the daily change is roughly the daily change of the median stock in that group of 1,700 stocks. This, if you look on a daily, has formed a rising channel, which it broke. which then it consolidated sideways and tried to take out the range and failed miserably. Now, it was a little extended when it took out this range. So in theory, I don't mind that it's back in the range so much, but if it's going to reset for more up, it has to happen now. I wouldn't want to see it drop below. Well, we've got the 21-day EMA, the 50-day EMA, probably, and then sort of a little mini pivot here. It has very little room to move lower before I would consider this just a sideways bearish consolidation. This would head back to the bottom of the range, which is again is the third touch of the bottom of the range, which likely breaks and ultimately takes us all the way back to the October lows. So I am very, very cautious on this market, as you can see. That is it for the stocks that I'm watching for next week. So while just a quick recap, I am liking the looks of the crypto stuff, and I would not hesitate to get into that stuff. But while the large cap stocks seem to be pulling back orderly in an orderly fashion, I am very concerned about what's happening in the broad market as well as in the financials. So I will review these picks in my video next week. Until then, everybody, I hope you all have a green trading week and enjoy your time with the market. Talk to you later. Bye.